Unaware that his wife was the highest shareholder of his company, husband left his wife and triplets for his mistress. What happened next? He didn't just leave. He spread divorce papers across the desk of the home office his wife had helped him build, looked her in the eye and said she was making his life small. Then he picked up his suitcase, checked his ringing phone, Tiffany flashing across the screen, and walked past the toys on the floor without looking back at his children. That morning, Grace Miller's hands shook as she stared at the papers in front of her. Her husband, Michael, stood a few feet away in his suit, already dressed for a new life. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed. "I'm filing. I'm done with this. I need someone who understands my future." In the hallway, three small faces watched from the shadows, their triplets in school shirts and mismatched socks, clutching their backpacks, trying to understand why their father was choosing another woman over their family. He thought he was trading a boring wife and noisy home for a fresh start with his glamorous PR consultant and endless business parties. He thought he was walking away from a woman with no real power, just a wedding ring and 3 kids. He thought the company with his name on the door was his and his alone. But what he never knew was this: the quiet woman he just left behind had been holding more than memories. She held the largest share of his company, hidden under her maiden name, tied to a promise her father made before he died. Later that same week, while Michael toasted his new life, Grace opened an old folder and made a calm call to legal. "This is Grace Foster. As majority shareholder, I am calling an emergency meeting of the board." This isn't just a story about a man who left. It's about what happens when the person you underestimate most is the one who actually owns everything you're standing on. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Grace's voice disappear back into the background. When you click that button, you stand with every abandoned wife, every forgotten child, and every quiet soul who chose to rise instead of break. Please subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The sound of clattering plates broke the morning silence. Grace Miller's movements were sharp yet graceful. A woman trained by years of repetition, by duty disguised as love. The kitchen glowed in soft golden light, spilling across the counter where 3 small breakfast plates waited in a neat line. Each plate carried identical portions: scrambled eggs, toast cut diagonally, and a small slice of apple arranged in the shape of a heart. It wasn't habit. It was love turned into precision. Grace, 36, was the kind of woman people rarely noticed until silence fell. Calm, steady, with eyes that held stories she never told. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose bun, a few strands escaping as she moved between the stove and the table. The faint hum of a washing machine filled the background, blending with the laughter of 3 little voices upstairs. Her triplets, Emma, Ethan, and Evan, 6 years old and identical in energy, were getting dressed for school. Across the room sat a briefcase, Michael Miller's. Michael, 40, was her husband and the man she'd built her world around. He was brilliant, ambitious, a man who had turned his small marketing firm into a rising empire. Yet lately that brilliance carried an edge. His compliments had turned into absent-minded nods, his goodbyes into quick waves. Grace noticed it, but she never asked. Asking, she believed, made love defensive. She placed a steaming cup of coffee beside his chair, aligning the handle perfectly. Her reflection in the cup shimmered. Tired, maybe, but composed. Then the laptop pinged. Grace wiped her hands and walked to the counter, where her personal email was open. A new message had arrived. The subject line read, Q4 proxy vote and dividend notification. Confidential. Her breath caught for a second. The email was addressed not to Mrs. Miller, but to Etienne, Ms. Grace Foster. No one at home called her that. It was her maiden name, a name tied to a history even Michael didn't fully know. She clicked it open, eyes scanning quickly. Dear Ms. Foster, as the majority shareholder of Miller Holdings, please find your quarterly dividend statement attached. Your proxy vote for the upcoming annual meeting is now requested. If you again choose to abstain, your vote will defer to the chairman as per our bylaws. She read it twice. She always abstained. It was her quiet way of showing Michael she trusted him. With a calm expression, she moved the email to a hidden folder, unread. 12 years earlier, the hospital room was dim. Arthur Foster, A man once feared in boardrooms, looked fragile. Grace, 24, sat beside him. "Dad," she whispered, holding his hand, "please don't talk about business." Arthur smiled weakly. "Business is what will protect you." He nodded toward a leather folder. Inside, transfer of ownership, 51% shares, Miller Holdings, from Arthur Foster to Grace Foster. Her eyes widened. "Dad, this is Michael's company, his dream. You can't—" "It was my seed money that built his dream," he said. "And you, with your finance background, were the one reviewing his proposals and making it work. This is your foundation." "Michael would never— He loves me." Arthur smiled faintly. "Love blinds the best of us. Promise me something. Use this power only when love forgets its duty." His hand went still. "I promise," she sobbed. Grace had folded that document and hidden it away. She told no one. When they married, she thought partnership meant unity, not ownership. She helped him from home, organizing budgets and building connections, all while raising the triplets. She never reminded him that his first loan came from her father's trust. She didn't need him to know. She wanted him to feel safe. A thud pulled her back to the present. Michael came down the stairs, adjusting his tie, his phone already pressed to his ear. He didn't see the warmth she'd spread across the table. His voice was sharp, businesslike. "Yeah, tell them we'll double the pitch budget. I'll deal with the numbers later." He glanced at Grace only briefly, offering a distracted smile. "You're amazing," he said absently, pocketing his keys. "I'll make us proud." Grace wiped her hands on a towel, forcing a gentle smile. "You already did," she replied softly. He kissed her forehead, quick, mechanical, and hurried toward the door. For a long second, she stood there. She walked to his briefcase, fixing the strap. Inside, she saw the edge of a glossy company magazine with his face on the cover. Michael Miller, the man behind Miller Holdings Success. Her eyes lingered. The article headline glared like a whisper she wasn't supposed to hear. He built it all from scratch. Grace's fingers tightened on the briefcase. Upstairs, the children called her name. She took a deep breath and smiled, the kind of smile a mother wears to keep the house from collapsing. Outside, a car horn sounded. Grace looked through the window just in time to see Michael get into the passenger seat of a sleek black sedan. The driver, a young, radiant woman in a sharp blazer, laughed at something he said, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. Grace blinked once. The spoon in her hand trembled slightly, then stilled. "Everything," she whispered again, "is fine." But the way her voice cracked said otherwise. The ballroom lights flashed like camera shutters and laughter rose over the music. Champagne flutes clinked. The sound of celebration was thick, almost suffocating. Michael Miller stood at the center of it all, surrounded by executives, clients, and reporters. His charm worked like a spotlight. Wherever he moved, attention followed. His name, the man who built Miller Holdings from the ground up, was repeated across the room like a slogan. He looked the part. Confident suit, smooth voice, perfect smile. But the confidence had teeth now. Sharper, colder. At his side was Tiffany Lane, the new PR consultant. 28, ambitious, effortlessly radiant. She wasn't just beautiful. She was skilled at making people feel seen. She had joined the company 2 months ago, and within weeks, everyone knew her name. She had a way of saying "we" that made people forget she hadn't been there from the beginning. She stood beside Michael now, laughing at something he said, touching his arm as though she'd earned the right. "Michael," she said in her bright practiced tone, "you're the face of the brand. You deserve someone who can match your brilliance." He chuckled, pretending not to notice the meaning under her words. "Is that a job offer or a compliment?" "Both," she said, smiling. Her eyes lingered too long. The ballroom doors opened. Grace entered, alone. She was dressed simply, a soft blue dress, her hair pinned back neatly. She had left the triplets with a sitter, wanting, just for one night, to be his wife again, not just a mother. For a moment, no one noticed her. The crowd was too loud, too bright. Then a few turned, quick glances, quiet murmurs. Grace wasn't just a guest, she was the wife. But to them, that title seemed outdated, almost inconvenient. She smiled politely and moved through the crowd. Her eyes searched for Michael. When she finally saw him, her breath caught. He was laughing. Really laughing. The way he hadn't in months. Tiffany was beside him, her hand resting lightly on his sleeve. Grace froze mid-step. Her smile returned, but it didn't reach her eyes. Michael noticed her at last. He blinked, startled, then forced a grin and walked over, adjusting his tie. "You made it!" His voice was cheerful but rushed, as if her presence had interrupted something. Grace's gaze flicked briefly toward Tiffany, who smiled back, too warmly. "Of course," Grace said softly. "It looks like a wonderful party." Michael gestured awkwardly. "Everyone, this is my wife, Grace." There was polite applause from a few tables. Tiffany stepped forward, her tone smooth. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Miller. I've heard so much about you." Grace's lips curved faintly. "All good things, I hope." Tiffany tilted her head. "Of course, Michael speaks so highly of your dedication." The pause between her words carried a hidden edge, admiration wrapped in condescension. Grace felt it. The party continued, music played, speeches began. Michael took the stage to thank his team, his investors, his mentors. Grace waited for him to say her name. He didn't. Not once. Her hands folded in her lap as she smiled politely, nodding at the applause that followed his speech. Inside, something fragile trembled. When Michael stepped down, Tiffany was the first to greet him. Cameras caught the moment she whispered in his ear, a whisper followed by his laugh. Flash, smile, applause. Grace's reflection shimmered in a half-empty glass of wine. The noise faded for her. That night, she thought, I realized I was becoming a guest in the life I built. Later, as the party thinned, Grace gathered her coat. Michael was still talking with Tiffany and a few clients. Grace didn't interrupt. She waited, patient, polite, invisible. When he finally approached, his voice was distracted. "I'm sorry, honey. I've got to stay a little longer. There's a private after event with the sponsors." "Of course," Grace said quietly. "I'll get home safe." Tiffany walked past them, her perfume sharp in the air. She turned slightly toward Michael, voice low but just loud enough for Grace to hear. "You'll have to let go of distractions if you want to lead." Grace's eyes lifted, calm, steady, but unreadable. Michael hesitated. "Tiffany, that's not—" But Tiffany only smiled, placing a manicured hand on his arm. "I meant business distractions, of course," she said sweetly before walking away. Grace didn't respond. She only watched her husband's expression, how he didn't move his hand away fast enough. As the cab drove her home, Grace's eyes stayed on the passing lights. Each blur of color looked like the life she thought she understood, now slipping away. At a red light, she looked at her phone. The silence on it was louder than any text. He hadn't messaged to see if she got home safe. Her reflection in the dark window looked older, colder. She whispered, barely audible, "I already know." When the light turned green, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Michael himself. "We need to talk tomorrow. It's important." The screen dimmed, leaving her face in shadow, the calm before the break. The sound of paper hitting the desk was sharp, like a door slamming on the past. Michael's voice cut through the silence. "I can't do this anymore, Grace. You make everything heavy." Grace flinched at the words, though he hadn't raised his voice. The papers fanned across the polished wood of their home office, legal forms, typed names, and clean signatures waiting for ink. The room felt smaller than usual. The walls that once held laughter and late-night planning sessions now pressed in. Michael stood tall in his dark suit, still wearing the same cologne that once made her heart ache. But tonight, it smelled like distance. Grace didn't speak right away. She just stared at him, her fingers trembling slightly. "Michael," she said finally, her voice steady but low. "You're tired. We both are. But this isn't how people who built something together just end it." He sighed, turning away. "Grace, we didn't build this together. I built it. You kept things running, and I'm grateful, really. But I need something different now. I need air." Different. Air. Words too soft to carry the weight of betrayal. In the weeks after the party, his changes became clear. like a picture fading one color at a time. Late nights stretched longer. His phone stayed locked even at home. He stopped lingering after hugs. Grace had asked once quietly, "Is something wrong?" He smiled, distracted. "No, just pressure at work." But the pressure wasn't from work. It was from guilt he hadn't learned to name. Back in the office, Grace reached for one of the papers. The black letters blurred for a second before her eyes refocused. Petition for dissolution of marriage. She read it again, slowly. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. "I already spoke with my lawyer. This is clean and fair. You'll be comfortable. I'll make sure of that." Comfortable. The word burned. Her eyes lifted to his. "What about the kids?" "I'll take care of them," he said quickly. "They'll be fine. I'll still be around, just not here. Not like this." Grace blinked, trying to process the calm certainty in his voice. He wasn't asking. He was announcing. And beneath that calm, she sensed excitement. Freedom. Someone waiting for him. "Tiffany," she whispered without meaning to. He froze for just a heartbeat, then looked away. "I didn't say that," he muttered. "Don't twist things." Grace smiled faintly, not out of amusement, but disbelief. "You don't need to say it, Michael. You've already said it with your absence." For a moment, the air thickened between them. He picked up a pen. "Grace, please, let's not make this harder than it has to be." She looked at him, the man she once helped build dreams with, now signing away the last tie between them. He signed his name swiftly, almost relieved, and set the pen down. "I'll come by for my things tomorrow." Grace didn't move, didn't cry. Her voice was a whisper, not broken, just hollow. "You're leaving the woman who helped build your empire." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Built it? Grace, I built it. You were just there." And just like that, he was gone. The front door shut softly, but in Grace's mind it echoed like thunder. She stood there alone, the papers still fluttering slightly. Her eyes drifted across the room, the framed photo of their wedding, the family calendar, the briefcase she'd packed for him that morning. Then her gaze landed on the small, fireproof safe hidden behind a painting. Her safe, not his. She knelt, her hands shaking as she entered the combination. Her fingers brushed against an old leather folder, the one her father had given her. The label read, in faded ink, "Miller Holdings, Equity." Her heart thudded once, hard. She opened it. Inside were the original stock certificates, sealed letters, and her father's signature. Proof of power she had never used. Her father's words echoed, "Use this power only when love forgets its duty." Grace sat back slowly, the folder resting on her lap. The ache in her chest began to shift. Love had forgotten, but she hadn't. Outside, the triplets' laughter floated faintly. Grace wiped her tears and tucked the folder under her arm. "You'll take care of the kids," she whispered to the empty space. "We'll see about that." She locked the safe, whispering softly, "Then it's time I remembered who I am." The silence in the room deepened. Not emptiness anymore, but preparation. The house was too quiet. Grace stood at the bottom of the stairs, the leather folder clutched in one hand, the divorce papers in the other. The weight of both felt impossible. For an hour she hadn't moved. The front door was still closed, the living room empty, but the house felt different. It felt broken. Upstairs, she could hear the faint sound of a cartoon. Laughter. Her legs felt like lead as she climbed the stairs, each step in agony. How did a person do this? How did she tear their world apart just to explain that it had already been torn apart by someone else? She pushed open the door to the playroom. Emma, Ethan, and Evan were huddled on the beanbag chair, watching animated superheroes save a fictional world. "Mommy!" Ethan yelled, scrambling up. "Is Daddy home for stories?" Grace's breath hitched. The folder dug into her side. She sank to her knees, forcing a smile that felt like shattered glass. "Hey, sweethearts, can we turn that off for a minute? Mommy needs to talk to you." Emma, always the most perceptive, picked up the remote. The room fell silent. 3 pairs of identical, curious eyes fixed on her. "What is it, Mommy?" Emma asked, her voice small. Grace pulled them close, burying her face in their hair, smelling the scent of shampoo and childhood. You know, you know how much Mommy and Daddy love you, right? More than anything in the whole world. They nodded, their little bodies warm against hers. Sometimes, Grace started, her voice cracking. She stopped, took a breath. Sometimes grown-ups, their feelings change. Sometimes they forget how to be partners. Like in the movie? Evan asked. Sort of, honey. She looked at them, her heart breaking. Daddy isn't going to be living here with us anymore. The silence that followed was absolute. Emma's lower lip trembled. Is it because I spilled the juice? No, Grace said, pulling her tighter. Oh, baby, no, never. This is not your fault. This is about grown-up things. It is never your fault. But where will he sleep? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. He has another place to stay, Grace said, the word Tiffany burning her throat. Is he coming back? Emma whispered. Grace met her daughter's eyes. She had to be honest. He won't be living here again, sweetie, but he's still your father. He still loves you. Even as she said it, the lie tasted like ash. Ethan started to cry, a silent, confused sob. Evan joined in. Emma just stared, her eyes wide with a shock too deep for tears. Grace held them, all three, rocking them on the floor of the playroom, her own tears mixing with theirs. She whispered assurances she didn't believe, promising a future she couldn't see. It's going to be okay, she murmured over and over. Mommy's got you. We're going to be okay. She held them until their sobs quieted into exhausted sleep, one by one. She carried them to their beds, tucked them in, and kissed their foreheads. When she walked back into the hallway, the house was dark. The woman who had climbed the stairs an hour ago was gone. In her place was someone else. Her grief was still there, but it had a new neighbor, a cold, hard rage. He had not only broken her heart, he had broken theirs. She walked back downstairs to the office, the leather folder in her hand. You were just there, he had said. Her fingers tightened on the folder. You'll see, Michael, she whispered to the empty house. You'll see just how much I was there. She picked up her phone and found the number for her father's old law firm. The laughter on the television was too loud. Grace sat motionless on the couch, the glow of the screen painting her face in cold light. On the screen, Michael Miller was being interviewed, smiling. Alive in a way he hadn't been with her in months. The camera panned wider, and beside him sat Tiffany Lane, the PR consultant. Her red dress gleamed under the studio lights. She leaned in as Michael spoke, her manicured hand brushing lightly against his arm. The audience laughed. Grace didn't hear it. She stared at the screen until her vision blurred. A half-empty wine glass rested on the table. Toys were scattered across the floor. A drawing that said, I love you, Daddy. The house looked lived in, but hollow. Michael's voice from the TV echoed, Miller Holdings has always been about innovation. I'm lucky to have such an incredible team, especially Tiffany, who's brought new light into this company. Grace's breath caught. New light. Her eyes flicked toward the ring on her finger. It caught the reflection of the TV, glinting like it was mocking her. She whispered to herself, her voice trembling, You forgot who funded your first factory, Michael. Her mind didn't need a flashback. The memory was seared into her. Michael at 25, desperate, sitting at her father's old dining table. She had been the one to convince her father to write that first check. Back then, he had looked at her like she was the reason he breathed. Now he looked at another woman that way. Grace turned the volume down until the voices became muffled noise. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. A realization. Her phone was on the table. She unlocked it, her hand steady, and dialed the number she'd looked up an hour ago. It rang twice. Dalton and Associates, this is Mr. Dalton. Her father's lawyer. His voice was older, but still calm and familiar. Mr. Dalton? Her voice was hoarse. This is Grace Miller, Arthur Foster's daughter. The older man's voice softened. Miss Foster, it's been a long time. I was so sorry about your father. I still manage his trust. How can I help you? Grace blinked, her mind catching up. The trust? It's still active? Of course, he continued. All 51% of your shares in Miller Holdings. The dividends are accumulating. You've never claimed any." She looked around the empty living room. "No," she said quietly. "I never thought I'd need to." Dalton paused. "Is something wrong, Ms. Foster?" Grace closed her eyes. "Something's changed." He hesitated. "Would you like me to prepare a review of your holdings?" She took a long breath. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark TV screen, pale, tired, but with a glint in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Yes," she said softly, "and I need to see you. Tomorrow. I think my husband is committing fraud." When the call ended, the room fell silent. Grace placed her phone on the table and stared at the divorce papers beside it. Her hand trembled and the wine glass tipped over, red liquid spilling across the papers, bleeding into his name. She didn't bother cleaning it up. Instead, she stood and walked to the window. Outside, the night was calm. Her father's words echoed, "Never use this power, unless he forgets who you are." Her hand brushed her chest where her necklace rested, a small gold pendant, the letter F for Foster. Her breath steadied. Her silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was control. The TV replayed Michael's interview. Tiffany laughed again. Grace turned off the television. In the reflection, her face stared back, determined. From the hallway, one of the triplets' voices called softly in the dark, "Mommy, are you okay?" Grace looked toward the sound, her expression calm but unreadable. "I will be," she whispered. "Soon." The coffee cup trembled slightly as Grace set it down. The cafe was quiet, tucked in the corner of an old street. Across from her sat Mr. Dalton, her father's lawyer. He leaned forward, voice low. "You were right to call, Ms. Foster. Your 51% gives you authority, but your suspicions, they were also correct." Grace's heart raced, though her face stayed composed. He slid a folder toward her. "I requested a preliminary audit as your counsel. Michael can't block it. The consulting fees you flagged, they're all being funneled to a shell corporation, one registered to Tiffany Lane." She scanned them, her hands tightening. "Unauthorized transfers, expense reports signed by Michael?" Dalton nodded grimly. "Yes, if this goes public, it's embezzlement. It will destroy him." Grace closed the folder gently, her breath steady. "And the company?" "Stable for now," Dalton said. "But if the board finds out before you act, they'll panic. He'll be forced out, but the scandal could sink the stock. You, as majority shareholder, must control the narrative." She looked up at him, her eyes cold with purpose. "Then I need to be ready before they do." Later that night, Grace sat in another quiet place, a booth in a diner. Across from her now sat Carla Jensen, her old friend from the company's HR department. Carla, early 40s, sharp-eyed and fiercely loyal, had always been one of the few who treated Grace like more than the CEO's wife. Grace had called her after meeting Dalton. She needed internal proof. Carla stirred her coffee nervously. "I knew you'd call eventually," she said. "Everyone in the office is whispering, Grace. Tiffany's practically running the place. Michael doesn't even come to the Monday meetings." Grace stayed silent, her gaze fixed on the dark window. Carla leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You asked me to look into her expense reports. You were right. She's been flying first class on company business to resorts, listing them as client meetings. Michael signs off on every single one." Carla slid a small flash drive across the table. "It's all on there. Copies of the reports, the flight manifests. He's not just cheating on you, Grace. He's stealing from your father's company." Grace finally spoke, her tone soft but cutting. "Thank you, Carla. You won't regret this." Carla frowned. "What are you going to do?" Grace shook her head. "I'm not going public. I want it clean, legal, and final." Grace at her home office, sliding Carla's files into Dalton's legal folder. A photo on her screen of Tiffany signing documents beside Michael, her phone buzzing with Michael's name. She stares at it, lets it ring until it stops. A new email from Dalton. "The board meets on Friday. I've added emergency shareholder review to the agenda. They cannot refuse." Her triplets asleep on the couch. One murmurs in his sleep, "Mom, will Daddy come home?" Grace pauses, heartbreaking, but doesn't answer. Her voiceover, soft and haunting, carries through the sequence. "He thought betrayal was freedom, I thought silence was surrender. We were both wrong. A few nights later, Grace stood in Dalton's office. The air was thick with anticipation. The flash drive and Dalton's audit were filed neatly in a new gray folder. Dalton slid a document forward. This is it. Your proxy power. The proof of misconduct. You can call for his immediate removal. Carla's text came through at that moment. He's planning to announce Tiffany as co-director at the Friday meeting. Grace looked up, her expression unreadable. The clock ticked. She picked up the gray folder, her fingers brushing the edge. Her voice was quiet but final. Then I'll be there. As she turned to leave, she paused in the doorway, her shadow stretching across the floor. He won't see what's coming, she whispered. The glass doors of Miller Holdings swung open with a hiss. And for the first time, it wasn't Grace Miller's warmth that entered. It was Tiffany Lane's perfume. The office buzzed with forced smiles and quiet tension. Employees straightened their desks when Tiffany passed. Her red heels clicked against the marble floor like a metronome of control. She stopped at the corner of Michael's office, glanced around and said lightly, "If the numbers look bad, spin them. It's about perception, not accuracy." Nobody replied. Nobody dared. Inside the office, Michael Miller stood in front of the window. His suit was sharper, his face leaner. Success had given him everything he wanted. But lately, that success came with cracks. The whispers had started, falling profits, late payments, rumors of an audit. Yet he ignored them all. Tiffany walked in without knocking. "You have 3 calls waiting," she said. 2 investors and 1 from the press. Michael waved his hand impatiently. "Tell the investors I'll call back. The press can wait. Did you clear the announcement for Friday?" She smiled, setting the tablet on his desk. "New co-director. It's all set. You're the face of the company now, Michael. Ours." He smirked, pulling her closer. "It's my company now, Tiffany. Ours." Her laughter filled the room, but it was hollow. Outside his office, Grace's portrait still hung in the main hallway. A company tradition. The plaque beneath it still read, "Grace Foster Miller, co-founder and strategic partner." Tiffany noticed it every time. "Michael," she said, "you should take that picture down. It confuses people." He frowned. "It's just a photo." "It's a reminder," she corrected softly, "of someone who doesn't matter anymore." He didn't reply. That afternoon, Michael's phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a high-priority calendar notification. He glanced at it, irritated. "Mandatory attendance. Emergency board meeting. Friday, 9 a.m. He frowned. He hadn't called this. He buzzed his assistant. "Get legal on the line. Find out who called this meeting." He waited, tapping his pen. Tiffany watched him, annoyed by the interruption. His private line rang. It was the company's general counsel. "Mr. Miller, we received a formal request from the majority shareholder to convene the meeting." Michael froze. "Majority shareholder? I'm the majority shareholder." The line crackled. "No, sir. According to our bylaws, the 51% controlling stake belongs to a Ms. Grace Foster. We assumed it was a relative. The shares originate from Arthur Foster's initial investment trust." Michael's throat tightened. "Grace Foster. That can't be right," he stammered. She doesn't even work here." The lawyer paused. "According to our records, sir, she owns the company." The room fell silent. Tiffany looked up, confusion in her eyes. "What's wrong?" Michael didn't answer. His hand trembled. He looked out through the glass wall into the hallway. At the portrait he had ignored for months, the gold letters under her name gleamed. Grace Foster Miller. For the first time, he realized the storm wasn't coming. It was already inside the building. Michael turned back to Tiffany, voice low. "Cancel the co-director announcement." But his email pinged again. Meeting agenda attached. 1. Financial audit review. 2. Vote of no confidence in CEO. 3. Removal of Michael Miller. The tension in the boardroom was thick. The air conditioning hummed, but everyone's eyes were fixed on the door. Michael Miller stood at the head of the table, his face pale and sweaty. Tiffany sat beside him, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous frown. "This meeting is a formality," Michael was saying, his voice too loud. "A simple records error from a dormant trust." The doors opened. Grace Foster walked in. Her heels clicked against the polished marble. She wore a tailored gray suit, the kind of authority that didn't need to raise its voice. Her hair was neatly tied back, her expression unreadable. She carried a single gray folder. Michael froze. "Grace, what are you doing here? This is a private meeting. Get out." Every whisper died. The directors straightened in their seats. Mr. Harvey, the chairman and an old friend of her father's, spoke. "Mr. Miller, please. We were expecting a—" "Ms. Foster." Grace didn't look at Michael. She walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, her father's old chair. "Good morning," she said calmly. "I'm Grace Foster." Her tone was polite, yet heavy enough to command silence. Tiffany tried to speak, forcing a light laugh. "This is absurd. Michael, tell them—" "That's exactly why I'm here," Grace interrupted softly, her voice cutting clean. She opened her folder and removed the stock certificates, sliding them to Mr. Harvey. "According to the Foster Trust records," she continued, "I own 51% of Miller Holdings. I am the majority shareholder." The room went silent. Michael's jaw tightened. "Grace, this can't be." She met his gaze for the first time, calm but unyielding. "It's real, Michael. My father gave me his shares. I never used them because I believed in us. But you forgot who built this with you? You forgot the woman who was just there." Her use of his own words hit him like a physical blow. "Effective immediately," Grace said, sliding another document forward, the audit. "I am calling for a vote. Michael Miller is to be removed as Chief Executive Officer, pending a full investigation into financial misconduct and breach of fiduciary trust." Gas filled the room. Michael lunged, grabbing for the papers. "You can't do this. You don't understand how this company runs." Grace didn't move. She slid another sheet toward him, the signed expense reports. Tiffany's signature was next to his. "I understand perfectly, Michael. You've been stealing from me and from my father's legacy to fund your new life, and you," she said, her gaze shifting to Tiffany, "were his accomplice." Tiffany shrank back, color draining from her face. For a long moment, no one spoke. Grace's wedding ring caught the light. Then slowly she removed it and placed it on top of the audit. The sound of metal against paper echoed. "Consider this," she said, "the end of both contracts." Mr. Harvey cleared his throat. "Mrs. Foster," he said, glancing at the papers, "these are legitimate. Your authority stands. All in favor of the motion to remove Mr. Miller?" Every hand but Michael's went up. "This is betrayal," Michael roared. Grace looked at him evenly. "No, Michael, this is balance." Security entered the room quietly. "Please escort Mr. Miller and Ms. Lane out until the board's private session concludes," Mr. Harvey said. Tiffany's lip quivered. "Michael, do something." But Michael just stared at Grace, the woman he dismissed as harmless. Her eyes met his one final time. There was no anger, only clarity. "I told you," she said softly, "silence isn't surrender." As the guards opened the doors, Michael's voice broke. "Grace, you'll regret this." She didn't look back. "No," she said quietly, "you will." The doors closed. Grace exhaled slowly. The room remained still, the weight of power shifting. The portrait of her father in the hallway glimmered faintly through the glass. Mr. Harvey leaned toward her. "You understand what this means, Miss Foster? There'll be headlines, scandals. The stock—" Grace gathered the folder, slipping her ring into her pocket. "Let them talk," she said. "The truth will speak louder." The world fell apart for Michael Miller faster than it had risen. News broke at dawn. CEO ousted by secret majority owner. Wife revealed as hidden shareholder. Scandal at Miller Holdings. Former CEO, PR consultant accused of embezzlement. Every article paired his downfall with her rise. Grace Foster, the woman behind the empire. Inside his penthouse, the chaos was louder than the storm outside. Papers littered the floor, unpaid bills stacked on the counter. Michael paced, tie undone, eyes red. His phone buzzed. He threw it across the room, and it shattered. "This isn't happening," he muttered. "It's just a mistake. I can fix it." But the mirror showed him the truth. Just a man who had burned every bridge. Cut to Tiffany Lane in her luxury apartment. The blinds were drawn. Boxes lined the floor, half packed. She was on her laptop booking a one-way flight. Her phone rang. She sighed and answered. "Michael," she said flatly, "you shouldn't call me." His voice cracked. "Tiffany, they're freezing my accounts. The lawyers are saying you authorized half the transactions." Her tone sharpened. "I only did what you told me to. You wanted shortcuts. I just showed you where to take them." "You said we'd win this together," he shouted. Finally, she looked up, a cruel smile on her lips. "You said it was your company, remember?" Silence. She closed the laptop. "Good luck, Michael," she said, ending the call. "You'll need it." The scene shifted to fast cuts, a montage of collapse and karma. A reporter. Sources confirmed Tiffany Lane was detained at the airport, attempting to flee the country. Michael leaving his penthouse, dodging cameras, shouting no comment. Grace in a simple dress, walking through the Miller Holdings lobby. The staff applauds quietly. She stops at her portrait and smiles. An auction notice on Michael's penthouse. Tiffany in a lawyer's office, crying, whispering, "I didn't know it would go this far." Grace's voice filled the quiet between the chaos. "He thought I wanted revenge. I only wanted peace. I wanted him to understand the difference between power and partnership, between taking credit and taking care." Her words lingered over slow visuals. Grace in her garden with her children, sunlight through the trees, laughter filling the air. The world outside was loud, but her home was finally still. She watched the triplets chase one another. They weren't asking about Daddy, they were asking about dinner, and that was enough. That evening, Grace sat in her study. The same folder that had once symbolized silence now rested open. The phone rang. The screen lit up. "Mr. Harvey, Board of Directors," she answered calmly. "Ms. Foster," Harvey said, voice respectful. "The board voted today. The investigation is complete. We've cleaned house. We'd like to formally invite you to accept the position of chairwoman of the board." Grace looked out the window. The garden bathed in golden light, her children laughing. "Ms. Foster," Grace smiled faintly. "Yes, Mr. Harvey, I accept." Harvey hesitated. "You're sure? It's a significant responsibility." Grace nodded. "It's my father's legacy. It's time I restored it." She ended the call and placed the phone beside the folder. For a moment, she closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet she had fought for. The television in the next room flickered. A news anchor's voice drifted faintly. "Former CEO Michael Miller seen leaving the courthouse after his arraignment. Sources say he is facing multiple fraud charges." Grace didn't turn to look. As she stood to turn off the light, her phone buzzed. A message from her lawyer, Mr. Dalton. The message read, "He's pleading guilty. He wants to see you. One last time." Grace's expression hardened, though her voice remained calm. "Then he'll see the woman he forgot." She turned off the lamp. The golden sun dipped low over the park, painting everything in warm amber light. Children's laughter echoed. Grace sat on a wooden bench, her gray coat wrapped around her, eyes following the three small figures running across the grass. Her triplets. Their joy wasn't shadowed by confusion. It was pure. One of them, Emma, ran back, cheeks flushed. "Mom," she asked softly, "will Daddy come back?" Grace's breath caught. Then she smiled, gentle, steady, full of peace. "No, sweetheart," she said, brushing hair from Emma's face. "Daddy made choices that mean he can't be part of our home anymore. But we are whole. You, me, and your brothers. We are a family." The little girl tilted her head, then smiled and ran back to her brothers. Grace watched them. For years, she had built everything around keeping a family whole. Now she realized it had always been whole. Her phone buzzed quietly. The screen showed a single new message. Subject, divorce finalized. Message, settlement complete. All assets transferred. Case closed. For a long moment, Grace just stared at it. Then she opened the message, read it once and smiled faintly. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then, slowly, she pressed delete. The phone went dark. A gentle breeze swept through the park. The trees above whispered, as if carrying her father's voice. Never let anyone take what you built. Grace lifted her gaze to the horizon. The world felt new. Voiceover, closing narration. He left me thinking I was powerless, but love never makes you weak. It only hides your strength until you need it. As the sun continued to fall, Grace gathered her things. Her children came running back. She took each of their hands and began walking toward the park's exit. Across the street stood the company building, tall, gleaming, alive with lights again. As the new chairwoman, her first act had been symbolic. The sign above the entrance no longer read Miller Holdings. It read Foster Industries. The name glowed gold in the fading light, her father's legacy reborn, her peace restored. Grace paused for a moment, looking at it with a soft, knowing smile. Then she turned and walked away, her children's laughter trailing behind her. As they disappeared, the wind carried a folded newspaper from a nearby bench. The headline read, Former CEO Michael Miller sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement. Tiffany Lane receives 18 months probation for testimony. The paper tumbled away. Grace never looked back. Her voice lingered softly over the fading light. Some endings don't need revenge, just truth.